I welcome each and every one of you to the first round of APWSDC 2020. My name is Rito Broto. I'll be a chair for this round. I would like my panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm XK. I use they them pronouns. Best of luck for the round.
Awesome. General housekeeping rules. All speeches are for 8 minutes. We encourage you to ask POIs. The general way of asking POIs would be in the chat. Unless and until speakers want to take POIs verbally, please mention the same before the start of your speech. Without further ado, on the motion that reads, this House, as a state with aging population, would opt for policies that increase immigration, for example, more visas, rather than ones that encourage citizens to have more children. I would like to invite the Prime Minister to open the case that stands in their name.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll start. Panel, immigrants are what make a country great. A melting pot of cultures, individuals that give back to the economy and are the foundation of the economy through their hard work. My great-grandparents came over to Malaysia from China a few decades ago, and I'm sure we all have similar backstories. And when it comes to aging populations, we believe that immigration is ever more important to redress the economic problems and demographic problems that have been created by it. We're so proud to propose. Before I get into my substantives, I'm just going to set up what we think the debate should look like. What is an aging population? We say it's characterized by a low birth rate and longer life expectancies. It often occurs within developing countries, and with this, it's important to note that they are economically less productive. They're finding it hard to replenish their population. There is a significant chunk of the population that is 60 and above, often individuals that are retired, that are not being economically productive, but instead relying upon their families or government funding. Under our side of the house, the way we would go about using policies to address this is in a few ways. So less bureaucracy within the immigration process, having more visas, having anti-discrimination laws in order to incentivize immigrants to come over to the country, things like job training and help centers, things like guest worker programs. It depends, note panel, that upon the situation that a country is in. If they need like working professionals such as doctors or lawyers to come over to their country, they can implement things like a point-based program that will reward those that have higher skill levels and that can assimilate more easily into the culture. If they need more manual laborers, they can accept more of those with the guest worker program. For example, we leave it up to the country in order to customize the ways in which they're going to incentivize more immigration to their country. And the final thing we just want to say for setup is that this has to be set in a pre-COVID world, simply so that these policies can actually be implemented. But before we go into our points, I will first want to clarify two things. Number one, we want to note that this is not, we're not aiming to prove that this is a perfect way to go about boosting the population. We just say that this is better than the comparative, which is incentivizing more childbirth. The second thing is that this is an actor debate. Governments have the incentive to want to create a productive society because that reflects well on them. It's all of it. In actuality, it's not really about how much they're able to benefit the citizens, but how much it reflects well upon them. And that means for governments who often have short terms, especially in the democratic countries, that the democratic states that govern a lot of these high income countries that have aging populations, this means that they want to show that there's going to be progress within their terms while they are still in office, instead of something that accrues a few decades in the future, like opposition would want you to have. Two arguments in my speech. Number one, why immigration is the best option for redressing aging populations. And secondly, why pro-natalist policies have no effect upon the root causes of an aging population, further detrimenting the economy and the existing situation. Into my first argument, there's three levels of analysis. The first is to say why this is actually effective to begin with and why people would come into the country in order to replenish that population. We say there is a large amount of people that seek better lives for their families. And we can evidence this in huge immigration waiting lists. For example, in the USA, where there's something up to like 20 years waiting for a green card in order to become a citizen and a naturalized citizen of that country. People who want to seek higher wages, who believe that their training as a doctor or a lawyer is not being effectively rewarded within their country. People who are escaping things like conflict and poverty and who believe that they can seek better lives elsewhere. These are often young people because they have the most potential to go and live a better life in another country. who often enter the labor market and are immediately very productive individuals because they have come with the intention to work within this country. Because they have come with the intention to work in this country, they give back to the labor market effectively. If we have looser policies, there's likely to be a large influx of immigrants because they were already waiting there to begin with. Why does immigration solve the problem of aging populations most effectively? So firstly, in the short term, we're guaranteed to have working age individuals coming in compared to the flip-floppy mechanism that they propose under their side of the house. But furthermore, they're also likely to reproduce sustainably because often they come with for example, the American dream, the idea that they want to start a family and a new life within this country, as opposed to all the individuals that are already in the country that do not want to give birth to have more children. So we're able to address this within the long and the short term. We also get economic revival. Why? Because number one, we get things like more individuals who are willing to work for lower wages, and thus we can replenish things like manual labor. We also have working professionals, and with every instance of free trade ever, this is able to leverage comparative advantage. So locals get pushed into better jobs that best leverage their comparative advantage, and we're also able to better facilitate trade with different countries around the world, because the immigrants best understand what the sort of trade flows and regulatory mechanisms surrounding their host country are, and we're just better able to boost the economy. I think I once read a study that said the removal of all labor barriers in the world would double world GDP. We also get things like fiscal benefits from government revenue that we're able to collect from these individuals. So as we can see, as a whole, this is an extremely holistic policy that is able to help boost the economy. The third and final level is about urgency, right? So this is implemented immediately. Maybe there will be 1 to 2 years where they adjust, they go through job training, or they rely upon state benefits. But this is versus their policy, which is literally having to watch a kid grow up and having to wait for an entire generation to replenish the population. We would note, for example, the case study of Japan, where they're suffering from crushing government debt, where they're suffering from deflation, and the economy is at an all-time low. We don't think that you should wait an entire generation for 20 years in order to actually go about changing the situation. And so even if the policies are of equal weightage and equal importance and are equally effective, we still think that our policy is better. And note again that this is an actor debate where we would prioritize having things in the short term because we are the government state, and we want to make sure that this reflects well upon us. The second argument then is about how pro-natalist policies are actually highly ineffective because individuals don't want to give birth to kids for two main reasons. Number one, for economic reasons. So we're talking about high cost of living that make it not worthwhile to have a child. Even if you give some arbitrary tax benefits to individuals, I don't think that this is likely going to change their calculus about having a kid that they have to support for 18 years, that they have to give food and shelter and education for in a very expensive and developed country. You also no longer need children to support you in your old age because you're financially sustainable in a developed country, and therefore these individuals don't want to have kids. Unless they want to take on a huge fiscal burden to entirely fund these children's existence, I don't think they're likely to change much under their side of the house. The second reason then is about cultural shifts. So firstly, women are prioritizing their careers more and more due to the emancipation that feminism has brought them, meaning that they no longer feel an emphasis to have children. This is an active choice that women are making that you're not going to be able to change with tax benefits. But also the fact that familial narratives are changing, the idea that you don't need to get married, you don't need to start a family in order for your life to be worthwhile, that people can focus upon themselves and their own self-development instead of raising a child. Those sorts of narratives are becoming more prevalent, and we do not understand how any sort of meager financial benefits can solve that under their side. So therefore, what we've told you that firstly, immigration is the best option, but secondly, that their policy is ineffective as a whole, means that when we weigh the two options, we have to go with immigration. My second speaker will tell you a bit more about why their policy is inherently coercive and why we have a more humanitarian policy as well under our side. We're so proud to propose.
I would like to thank the speaker for the speech, and I would like to invite leader of the opposition to open the case from their side.
Yes, immigration may be a better option, but immigration also brings a lot of high-skilled people. As government has said that there are people who seek better lives in different countries, Yes, but what does that leave for the low-skilled native people who seek for a better life too? These locals would have to fight their way against immigrants who have higher skills than them. And this would make the locals at a huge disadvantage. Individuals would also understand why having more kids would be more effective because of the cultural excuse me, because of the cultural difference. They would understand the culture more, and my second speaker will elaborate more on that. Yes, cultural shifts do come with immigrants, and better viewpoints on life also come with it, but many cultural disharmonies also come from these immigrants too, because they bring along their culture, and my second speaker will help to elaborate more. Now I will move on to my first argument. First of all, bringing more immigrants will make it more prone to human trafficking. Imagine having children that are forced to do work and labor in a foreign country and pushed to the edge every day by adults or people who gain benefit from the child. This is an example of what would happen if there were lots of immigrants. Our next argument is how immigrants might try to fake documents and try to enter. Yes, there will be more visas and more chances of them to come in, but there will still be people who don't have access to those visas, and they're determined to get into this country to gain better lives. We're very proud to propose.
I would like to thank the speaker for the speech, and I would like to invite the second speaker from government to extend the case on their side.
Chad, we told you that increasing immigration is the only way to help to increase the economy and make the society in this aging population country more productive as a whole, right? Before I move on into substantives, firstly, a few rebuttals. Firstly, the first thing we heard from the LO was that locals have a huge disadvantage if there are more immigrants that are coming into the country. The first thing we have to say is that immigrants who often relocate from developing countries are those that are looking for jobs and often opt for low-skilled labor. We tell you that high-skilled laborers or individuals would often stay in their own country. But even if there are high-skilled immigrants coming in from developing countries, we tell you oftentimes individuals like locals in a state where there's aging population, oftentimes the problem is that they are often retirees or people who rely on the government or such as welfare. And we tell you that is the problem with a state in aging population. The second thing we heard from them is that there'll be increase in fake documentation. This will happen anyway because there will always be immigrants trying to get into other countries. But we tell you in our world, there's less fake documentations because more immigrants from developing countries have access and the opportunity to come into these new countries, especially with states with aging population. This idea of fake documentations will decrease by a lot in our world, right? Understanding that, moving on to my substantives. So the first thing we told you is we told you that immigration was the best solution for countries and states with aging population, which we heard no response to, right? Firstly, we told you that this immigration is likely to be effective in the first place. Oftentimes, these immigrants from other countries are looking for job opportunities, will often come to these states looking for an opportunity to have a family, to settle down and earn some income, right? How then does this solve the problem of aging population? We told you the problem with aging population is that majority of your workforce is not productive, and the very presence of these immigrants will oftentimes take like jobs that like senior citizens or older individuals will not be able to take, oftentimes like labor or people like jobs that require younger people. There are less individuals relying on the government because we told you that there's a society that is more productive, and like those people can earn income and those people who are working. What then is the long-term solution of this? We told you in developing countries, there's a culture, like their culture there is like having children or having a family. And we told you that is a dream that when they come to a new country, they want to settle down, they want to have a life where they can earn, they have a job, and when they can have children. This indirectly will help to repopulate the country, the point in which we allow immigration, more immigration into these states, right? The second thing is these new cultures assimilate into the country. We tell you we have a culturally rich and diverse country, right? The second argument that we told you is why incentives like tax rebates of having children will not work. We told you, like, firstly, having children in a state with an aging population is very expensive. You have to pay for education, you have to pay for food, have to pay for shelter, and many more things until like they are able to sustain by themselves. It's very expensive to have children, and like tax rebates won't help this. Oftentimes, this is why individuals don't have children. But there are more reasons as to why individuals in this aging population state don't have children, right? For example, cultural reasons, where like they prefer to have a life to their own, where they can prioritize their career or they can prioritize their self-happiness before they have children. And oftentimes these are reasons why individuals in this state with the aging population don't want to have children in the first place, because they realize that they want to have self-happiness first. And this is why like giving them tax rebates or like some sort of marginal financial benefits won't encourage them to have children, right? But thirdly, the third argument why this is an inherently coercive policy, even if these individuals choose to have children. We tell you in current society today, even in states with no Asian population, there's already pressure on women to have children. This idea that you can only get self-fulfillment if you have a family, if you are a mother who has children. This is like stereotype on women that is like existing in current status quo. How then does increasing policies on opposition side increase pressure on women to have children? We tell you, firstly, the stereotype on men is to work hard and provide for family. But we told you that the pressure on men are likely to be unaffected because they are able to carry on their lives as they used to. They can continue to have a career and they can continue to work as if like there was no difference, right? But let's look at the pressure of women. In current society, there is already a pressure on women to have children because this is the only way that they can gain self-fulfillment. How then does the pressure on women increase? Firstly, these are individuals who are expected to have children. We explained to you the reasons that these women don't want children in the first place, and that's why you have an aging population, because they prioritize their career or they prioritize their self-happiness. What then happens in the side of opposition? Firstly, these women are expected to bear children in the first place, and there's an increasing amount of pressure by relatives, by friends, by society in general, to encourage them to have children in order to save the aging population state. Secondly, they are expected to prioritize children over their career. And thirdly, they are expected to care for their children. Is that POI? Yeah.
So you said that if women have children, there will be more pressure from their parents and relatives. But now the technology, like from the medicals, they're allowed to have IVF, is to take out their ovum or their eggs from the ovary and to fertilize it later on, which that will lessen the pressure. And why are you saying that there will be more pressure on women? And also the society has changed like more than decades now. Thank you.
Yeah, so firstly, these like like technologically advanced methods are often only accessible to rich women. But secondly, even if you like don't go through the pregnancy process, there's still pressure from society that you have to take care of these children until they're 18 years old. And oftentimes this means them like giving up their career, right? So what are the effects of this pressure? Firstly, the stereotype of women on having children in order to become fulfilled is entrenched. This is problematic because we told you that even though majority of these women don't want to have children in this aging population state, there's a stereotype pressure by relatives, friends, and family to for these women having children as their only way to become fulfilled. The second thing is the opportunity to have a career as a woman is denied for a few reasons, right? Firstly, corporations are less likely to want to hire them because they know that eventually these women have to go on paid maternity leave, and eventually these women are going to leave. There's less of an incentive for corporations to hire these women. Secondly, things like the wage gap increases, the point in which productivity of women when they have children decreases because of like maternity leave and the 9 months pregnancy and all that, right? We tell you the opportunity to have a career as a woman is denied, the point in which pressure on women increases to have children. So what did we tell you, right? Firstly, we told you why immigration is the best solution. In the short term, it increases the productivity of the workforce, and in the long term, it allows the country to repopulate and like increases the culture and diversity of the country. The second thing we told you is that financial benefits for having children is not a viable method, because we told you that there's so many more reasons why individuals don't want to have children: the economic, financial burden, and like cultural reasons, or like personal reasons that they don't want to have children. And the third thing we told you, even if these women choose to have children, it's an inherently coercive policy, and it's because of the fact that stereotypes are entrenched on them to have children, and they are likely to give up their career as a mother and as a stay-at-home woman. For all those reasons, now been prouder to propose.
Awesome. I would like to thank the speaker for the speech. Also, a quick note, do keep like track on the time that you're speaking and make sure you don't exceed like 8:15. Awesome. With that, I would like to invite the second speaker from opposition to extend the case on their side.
Acceptance is welcome, but that doesn't mean we can abandon our people. From the government have said, they have claimed that it is the best option because we don't have to wait for a long time to get people to be grown up and be productive. But that isn't remotely true, because if we have offered good education, for an example from Japan, we have heard that they have practiced their children since they were younger to be productive members of society. Therefore, that argument can be cancelled as that if you have good knowledge since you were young as to how to be productive member of society, you can start since you are young. And a diverse country isn't bad. However, it doesn't, like I said, doesn't mean we can just abandon our people. And from my house belief that our policy can help on this. They have also claimed that it is stereotypical of women to be pressured into gaining self-fulfillment by being pregnant. But however, like the POI have stated, it's not true because we can have lab children as they come back with only rich women. Our policy, as I will get on to now, will help that. Our policy is for the families that have a lot of kids to have lower tax, because they would get a burden. They only want to bring out happiness before the children or family because of how much money they need to pay. So by lowering the tax about education and products that they will have to buy, it will lessen the burden that could be taken on them. For an example that why immigrants doesn't always work is that in the US there are a lot of immigrants, yet there is a lot of crimes. Why? Well, low skilled immigrants do not get the same amount of money or wages as high skilled immigrant does, therefore leading them to do crimes and steal to earn money. When we compare the US is because sometimes people from other countries near them will come and live there instead, because it is much easier to just cross the border and just be in there. Maybe it's a personal issue, maybe economic issue. Either way, some people are low skilled, therefore not adding any benefits for the country. Uh, by doing like the policy said, it would lower the tax money, so it would lower the cost of high living, like the PM said. It would be a high cost of living, but that's not true with our policy. And they said that it can be changed because of the mindset people have. But it's really right now we are in the present, so therefore it's yeah, the POI, I think. POI.
Assuming that any of the harms you talked about are true, why do you in any way solve the problem of an aging population and repopulating the country in comparison to Gulf?
I don't really understand the POI. Well, I don't really understand the POI, so I'm sorry, but I need to get on with their argument. So they say that it's about the mindset of people. However, with us being in the present, that's not true. In 2020, women aren't forced to make children so they could be fulfilled, and many women do know that. Even if their family do not approve of it, many people can argue that that's not the only thing we need to get approval from. It is not needed that we are always asking to be having children for just to be happy. Also, there is also a high chance of human trafficking in this case, because as we know, human trafficking is not only about children getting their limbs cut off and being sold to do money begging. It's also about sending someone into a country, maybe a marriage or a job, and then putting something on them. For example, in a job case, you would let them work really, really hard, but give them really, really little wages for their hard work. That is a type of human trafficking because you're trapping them in your country. And by having less immigrants, that case would be lessened. There would be also unemployment from the fact that some people prefer immigrants over the people there, which would further discourage people from having babies. But that isn't right, because just having people coming into your country, and a case as of now, COVID, is forcing people to be stuck, or maybe they just don't get what they wanted. And being stuck in a country, for example, right now, some people are stuck in a country they don't want to be in. Maybe they have low protocol on health and anything else. There is also disharmony from racism because of how humans are treated. Sometimes immigrants got treated badly because they may be colored. For example, if a Mexican person do come into America or the US, they might get a backlash from it just because they're colored, and that's not fair. Of course that we can't change every single one based on how we act or try to push anything onto them. It won't help, but having less immigrant is maybe better for them and for us. Mostly for them because we want them to stay protected from any backlash they might get. And like I said, low skilled immigrants do not do any benefits for the country. Mostly because some are just escaping from their old country and they just came in because they can't stay in the old country anymore. And when you say that old citizens do not do much, that's true. However, with a new way of policy, maybe new generation would be more will be more encouraged to have more children in households and anything else. Even if it is kind of long, it's not saying that even because everyone matters in society, it is just helping in a little bit. Even children helps, even by not stealing, by not doing anything bad, they're helping the society. And that is my argument.
I would like to thank the speaker for the speech. Now I would like to invite the government whip to close out the substantive portion of government's case.
Hi, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. The opposition bench has failed on all counts to tell us why the mechanism that they propose, which is to tell us that having individuals or incentivizing citizens to give birth to more children will lead to a solvency mechanism to the problem at hand, which is the aging population that the state is aiming to solve in the first place. All of the harms that they brought to you, number one, I will rebut and tell you why none of them are true. But number two, even if you take them at their best case, at the assertive levels that they've told you about are true, they haven't told us to why this matters. And number two, this still does not refute the fact that we still solve the problem of the aging population in the first place, something that uniquely is exclusive from the side of government. So a few levels of rebuttals before I move in to the major key issues that occurred within this debate. I think number one, on the idea of racism and cultural disharmony, I think the first level to this is that even if it's true that a lot of people will face racism in this highly xenophobic or highly racist society, there's number one, a choice that an immigrant will choose to. So you're not forced to immigrate to that country, but if at the point in which you choose to go to that country for a better life and you face racism, this is something you consent to. We don't think this is something that you should go through, but it's something that you acknowledge and are likely going to have information about. Number two, if it's true that it causes cultural disharmony, I think it's a time for a change within the country. This often happens because of it's a byproduct of a monoculture within a country in the first place and less exposure to cultural diversity. I think you solve this in the long run by introducing a more culturally diverse individuals in immigrants. We think in the short term, maybe you have some sort of discord or some sort of disharmony, but I think in the long run, it produces individuals that are far better and far more capable of being better individuals to other people of other races. Secondly, on the idea of illegal immigrants, I think I have three levels for this. The first, that is simply blatantly isn't true. The need for illegal immigrants only exists when the process of immigrating is one that's extremely hard, one is extremely bureaucratic, something that's discriminatory and very limited in the first place. We think we completely solve this in the second level of analysis, as to tell you why this is literally a problem that only exists within the side of opposition. Because what we do on the side of government is we open up the avenues for which an immigrant is able to access immigration through legal means and methods. This means that more individuals are able to opt into that system rather than having to illegally cross borders or having to stall within aircrafts or cross the borders through illegal means in the first place. This is a problem that they brought up, but they are the ones that have to face it. And thirdly, we think we solve this because we remove all the barriers of entry that forces a lot of individuals into illegal immigration in the first place. We don't think we completely eliminate the problem. We tell you substantially we make it far less on our side. And this is a problem that propagates on the side of opposition. Thirdly, on the idea of child trafficking, we think this is a literal wash, or we don't know the idea or the magnitude of this impact in the first place. This is something that exists on both sides. We think firstly on our side, we obviously have background checks that are extensive. We're not going to let terrorists, for example, or individuals with extensive criminal records into the country. We think there's a long list of individuals that do not commit a lot of crimes, or people who are good citizens that we can let in also. And number two, these are people that are likely to enter illegally anyway. So a lot of these individuals stay near the borders in order to kidnap individuals that are crossing the places in the first place, or stay near forested areas so they're able to hide within these sorts of places. We think this is an argument that's a wash. And lastly, on the idea of exploitation of low-skilled workers, we think it's intellectually dishonest for the side of government to simply tell you that low-skilled labor doesn't matter, but then also tell you you're going to steal a lot of jobs from individuals in the first place. We think this is something that is contradictory in nature. But secondly, we tell you that low-skilled labor is the backbone of the economy. And often the reason we need the immigrants in the first place is to fill a gap that is left in an economic dead zone because of the aging population. So we don't understand the types of jobs that you're stealing from individuals in the first place. And lastly, when they said you're stealing jobs from high-skilled individuals within the country, low-skilled people within the country, we think that that isn't to a large degree in the first place, because a lot of high-skilled immigrants are a lot harder to find, and they're likely going to be niche in those sorts of categories. So what are the three key main issues that occurred within the debate? We think firstly on the solvency of the aging population, secondly on whether or not this is a coercive policy coming out from the side of opposition, and thirdly on the age of women and feminism in the 21st century is incentivizing them to have more children and putting the brunt and the burden of repopulation on them, something that is fair. We think number one on the solvency of the aging population, this was only solved under the banner of side of government, because we've told you firstly why immigration immediately solves the problem at hand in a short-term scale, because you're introducing individuals of multiple age brackets into the country, into the labor forces to fill in the gaps in the first place. These are individuals that are likely going to repopulate because of the narratives that they use when they come to the country in the first place. We think this is an immediate solvency mechanism to the problem at hand. Why do we tell you it's ineffective from the side of opposition, even with the lackluster amount of analysis we got from them? Number one, even if it works to an effective degree on the side of opposition, and this is taking them at their best case, notice that the amount of capable individuals to be child bearers biologically is something that is diminished on their side because of the aging population. But secondly, them proposing IVF is simply not a sustainable option, because number one, this is oftentimes something that isn't legalized in a lot of countries, or isn't something that people feel safe doing. And secondly, individuals shouldn't feel the need to have to cut their bodies open in order to fulfill a need the state has failed to provide in the first place. We tell you on those fronts, we tell you this issue clearly goes to the side of government, because we told you in the long run how we're able to sustainably fix the economy by filling in gaps within the country currently as a result of the aging population at hand. And secondly, we told you why even in their best case, it fails in all accounts, because even if they are able to incentivize all individuals to give birth, number one, that isn't a large degree of skill in the first place. And number two, all you're going to do is prolong a generation of an aging population, because the individuals that are able to actually give birth are likely going to be in the ranges of 20 to 40, for example, where it's most safe to do so in the first place. These are individuals that are going to perpetuate another cycle of an aging population further on. Secondly, whether or not this is coercive and bad. We think this is coercive in so far as it tells individuals, especially women, to have to give birth, because the burden of solving over the underwhelming population and the aging population now is the burden that's faced by them in the first place. So you offer them cash handouts and incentivizing them to give birth. Why is this directly coercive? We tell you, look at the nature of this country in the first place, absent of this policy. What does an aging population tell you? What does individuals choosing the option not to have children tell you? It tells you that people on the ground, especially women, are actively opting in to not have children because this is not a choice that they want to have. But number one, when you place the narrative that is solely onto them to solve the issue of an aging population, number two, with financial incentives, and number three, if it's true that there's going to be so much backlash from immigration, and if immigration is the last alternative, assuming that you're unable to repopulate, these are all the narratives that work against women into allowing men in patriarchal societies to pressure them into having children in the first place. We think this is immense pressure and ties into the third issue that is directly unfair on the side of opposition. We think individuals in the 21st century should have the choice, especially women, to opt into not wanting to have children if they feel the need to do so. When the entire future of the next century of the country is solely lied onto you, there's immense burden that is placed onto you, and that's something that's coercive and is utilized and weaponized against you as a woman and as a minority to then have children in the first place. We tell you this is the kinds of harms that only exist exclusively on the side of opposition that we eliminate on the side of government through immigration policies that are implemented on our side. If you want a solvency mechanism for the aging population, if you want a mechanism that isn't coercive, side with side government.
I would like to thank the speaker for the speech, and I would like to invite the op whip to close out the substantive portion of ops case.
Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly audible.
So as my Prime Minister has said that, as my leader has said that immigration brings a lot of high-skilled people. Yes, like they do high-skilled people, but some of them have lower skill, which did not benefit since they get out from their own country just to get into our country to gain work. But doesn't it mean that we will get, steal our worker getting skilled this job. And even in COVID-19 right now, the crisis is not good. And also that if they come here, they'll get stuck. And having more kids is effective. The reason is because of cultural shifts come with better population, and the disharmonies come from the immigrants too, since they bring their culture, and maybe it might destroy our own culture that has been originated from our ancestors too. And it is also more prone to do human trafficking, like child selling pushed into labor with low wages. And as the Deputy Prime Minister had said that increasing immigration makes country more productive. But is that POI?
How does exploitation of workers exist when you have things in developed countries such as minimum wage laws and unionization?
Well, wages laws and humanization, is that what you're trying to say? Well, sorry, I don't really understand that. Can you please explain more of your question, please? Okay. So also that they said that it is very expensive to have children because of economic and culture. Well, I might disagree about that, because who is going to make the country better, to develop a country, since if the parents now, the individuals doesn't want to have their children, want to spend their time with themselves, want to bring themselves first, it should be me first. Like example, the individual will be saying that, hey, I need money to feed myself, to make myself live. But don't you think that in the future there might be more immigrants, and more immigrants means that there will be lesser people that used to be there. And also that in the US, there's a lot of immigrants too. If you say that there's more immigrants, they will even make the population boost, or also say that, excuse me, it will be boosting the economic too, and making it productive, since in the country has only 60 and up people, old ones. But actually the immigrants might not do the same thing. They might make crime since they don't really work, they don't benefit, and that might bring the country down. And as you said that child trafficking exists on both sides, I might say it doesn't. Well, if there's no immigrants, there won't be any child trafficking. And also that, as I mentioned in my POI earlier, that we can do IVF, or getting the eggs out by doing the medical things, but actually you don't have that. You don't have to do that. And today we don't have that mindset that, hey, women need to have children. You need to have now. You're going to turn 40. Yeah. So what? You can focus on your work first, then you have second. And you said that it's illegal for immigrants to exist. The immigrants exist only when there's illegal things, but actually there can be more of them today and also in the future. And it's not really valuable. Well,
Government had constantly been mentioning the problem of stereotypes and mindset that women are forced to have children. We aren't forcing women to have more children. This is the present. It's 2020. We're just giving more financial aid and tax breaks to support people, like my DOL had stated. They had tried to constantly attack us on the fact that human trafficking won't exist with the current laws and regulations. But that isn't true, is it? Because even if there are more visas, there are still people who can't gain access to that. And there will still be illegal immigration and human trafficking. Immigration wouldn't help with changing the culture of shifts and changing the mindset, because of course we can't change everyone's mindsets, can we? Thank you.
Thank the speaker for the speech. I would like to invite Gov Reply to close out this debate.
Hello? Okay. Panel, the case brought to you by side opposition was inherently flawed for a number of reasons. Firstly, they focused on an inherently stereotypical understanding of what immigrants can bring to a country. Although we told you again and again that that was not the case, and it was substantiated with facts and evidence that, immigrants help supply the labor market and they help develop the GDP of a given country. They do not, like popular convention, steal jobs. But we took their case at their best. We took them to say, oh, maybe there would be backlash, and we extrapolated their case to argue that would not happen for a few reasons. Firstly, that we told you we had tailored policies from the get-go that would be able to cater to the existing narratives that existed within society. Second, the facts and logic that we presented, that we think that rational citizens will also be able to understand at the point in which they're actually able to benefit actively from these immigrants being in their country. It was ridiculous for them to claim the high road of being more humane by telling these immigrants what was good for them, by saying that there was some level of racism in the country and therefore you should not go and pursue a better life, even though that was your active choice that you wanted to make for yourself. Any other problems that they brought to you substantively weren't actually defending the positive case of childbirth, right? All that they told you was problems with their mechanism. Things like saying, but there will still be illegal immigration on your side of the house. Things like saying, oh, there will be human trafficking. But if they wanted but they seem to want no immigrants whatsoever, because these problems will always exist no matter the circumstances. And like we said again and again, this will essentially be made better under our side of the house, where people have legal ways in order to enter the country, where they don't feel coerced out of desperation to resort to such dangerous measures, because we as the government are actively letting them in and letting them pursue a better life. It was ridiculous for them to argue that they had the moral high ground when they wanted to lock them out, when they wanted to coerce women into having to the extent that their policy is effective, to coerce women into having more children when they didn't want to begin with. If they're going to say things like, oh, we will lower education prices as a whole, we will have these tax breaks be so effective to the point where it becomes actually effective to address an aging population, I would say that's coercive. If it's a policy that's so effective that you can change the entire calculus of an individual to want to give a child give birth to a child and raise them for 18 years. And this is something that I think is not going to be motivated by the right reasons to have a child brought into a family that actually loves them and wanted to have them in the first place. They cannot stand by their policy. Just to isolate a few of the nuanced arguments that went really unresponded to, they tried to with some assertions that weren't really substantiated, and they often tried to take the least significant parts of our case and didn't really weigh it out, because we told you things like immigration is the best option for redress. It is effective because there are literally lines of people waiting to enter your country that can begin work immediately, compared to the decades that you have to take in order to foster an entire workforce. We told you that this allows for economic revival without you actually having to create new humans. We told you that pro-natalist policies essentially have no effect on root causes, not just about women, which they chose to cherry pick, but also the fact that familial narratives are constantly changing. The idea that you don't need to have children in order to be successful, that you can focus on yourself, that is maybe a bit too costly to have children in this country, and you would be better by yourself. The only response that they gave was became more expensive and more unfeasible as their speech went on, where they wanted to essentially reform the whole system that dealt with children in order to address this. But we had a much quicker, less expensive, and more effective policy to begin with that was also more humane and didn't lock people out of the lives that they wanted to pursue for so long. Panel, it was not enough for them to tell you we have IVF, for them to say there'll be some level of illegal immigration, because they were highly uncomparative, highly assertive, and we needed to see more engagement. That's why side proposition takes this debate.
Awesome. Thank the speaker for the speech. Thank both sides for the debate. Now, I guess my panelists would deliberate and you guys can hop back to the main meeting. We'll call you once we have the verdict ready. Yep.